In the world full of podcasts, he's the undisputed heavyweight champion of hot takes, an Auburn sports homer, master of the boog, and message board legend. Get your buttons buttoned and your hats flattened because the Top Button Podcast is about to kick off, and you don't want to miss your courtside seat. Now, here's your host, Charlie Five.
Yes, sir. We're back again. It's another episode of the Top Button Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Rush, a.k.a. Charlie Five, and we are ready to get after it. Happy Wednesday. Have a special guest on from the big show, the next round, Mr. Lance Taylor. Fired up to have you in. We're going to talk about Jackson Arnold, expectations on the season, the roster rebuild. Lance is kind of the conductor on the Jackson Arnold hype train, so we're definitely going to jump into that here in just a second. But before we do that, let's give a quick shout out to mybookie.ag. Use coupon code BARN for a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. You give them $100, they're going to give you 50 back free to play with. I think you even get a $10 casino chip as well. So definitely show them some love. Easy deposits, easy withdrawals. It's mybookie.ag. Lance, we had some technical difficulties, but I think we got this thing reeled in and we are ready to go.
Well,
thank you.
First of all, I appreciate you having me on. Love the work you guys do at the barn. If you ever watch the next round, you know how technically challenged I am, but StreamYard's not that difficult, so I don't understand why this took me this long, but I do apologize, but I'm here now. I love that I am the conductor of the Jackson Arnold train based on the fact that I've got him 6th out of 16 quarterbacks. It's not like I've got him 1 or 2, but I am catching so much hell and grief. Like, what do you see in this Jackson Arnold kid? Let me start by saying this. There's maybe the most established quarterback coming back is Diego Pavia for Vanderbilt. Like, there's so many unknowns. Like, I think Lenora Sellers, who, and you know, if we get into these rankings, I've got number 1 with all this upside, but still, I mean, we've only seen him for a season. Lagway, we've seen him for a little bit of a season. Arch Manning, we've never seen him start significant games. I think Nussmeier would be one of those other established guys. Austin Simmons, Taylor Green did it at Bowling Green, or excuse me, did it at Boise for a little bit. But it's not like we've got, premier quarterbacks coming back in this league. So I think there's a lot of unknowns, and I think it's easy for people to pick apart this list, but I'm sticking by it, Kyle. I feel good about this list.
So what do you like about Jackson as far as how do you take what you saw last year and sort of stash it away, compartmentalize all of the issues that were going on at Oklahoma? We've talked about those ad nauseum. What do you like about his game, particularly with the fit of Hugh Freeze? It seems like on the surface a match made in heaven, but just what do you see as far as his game and how it fits with what Hugh Freeze likes to do?
I think he's I don't think he's been given much of an opportunity to start. I mean, obviously this guy is a super talented 2023 Gatorade Player of the Year. And then if you watched Oklahoma last year, first of all, Venables, I think jury's still out how good he's going to be as a head coach. I do think Oklahoma is going to be one of the more improved teams, maybe the most improved team in the SEC this year. And so by me saying that, people are like, well, they're getting rid of the quarterback and he's going to Auburn. So how are you this high? Well, I'm really high on John Mateer too. But I do think Jackson Arnold, one hand tied behind his back last year. When you looked at, he's in an offense where your top 5 receivers are pretty much on the shelf. You don't have a running back that goes for over 600 yards. The offensive line was god awful. You're talking about giving up 50 total sacks on that offensive line. He never had a shot. Look, and he going back to his first start, we saw him in that bowl game in 2023. Turn the football over too much, but you see this in a lot of these guys' first starts. But now when you look at the weapons, he's going to have a much better offensive line. I think it gets a little solidified when you bring in guys like Xavier Chaplin and Mason Murphy. And then you look at the receivers he's going to have. I mean, I think everybody knows the ability and how Cam Coleman came on at the end of the year, Malcolm Simmons, and then you bring in an Eric Singleton that can do absolutely everything. I just think he's got these weapons at his disposal. People – and I think this is probably more from other fan bases, Kyle. Like, you talk to Auburn fans day in, day out. And I think sooner or later, Hugh is going to have to win some games and win a lot of games to get back on the really good side of Auburn fans. But I think there's a lot of people out there that are like, what has Hugh Freeze really done outside of beat Nick Saban twice? He's had really good quarterbacks. So you go back to Chad Kelly, you go back to Bo Wallace, you go back to Malik Willis. And I think Jackson Arnold, physical guy that is much more athletic. We didn't get to really see that last year. Much more athletic than people give him credit for. Peyton Thorne was more athletic too, but I just think this is a great fit in this system with those weapons. And I think by middle of the season, people are going to be talking about, oh, okay, this is why he was the 5-star guy coming out.
Yeah, I think one underrated aspect from last year that's not really talked about a lot is, obviously Oklahoma had a offensive coordinator firing like mid-season, and shortly they love to talk. Everybody loves to talk about Jackson being benched, but what's not really talked about is once that offense had that change, once they had that change, they went back to him, and I think that kind of speaks a lot. Not that they were just having a ton of success with either of the first two guys, but when they went back to more of the read option, just can try to control the ball and see if your defense can win you the game late, they went back to him. And I think that's something that's not really talked about a ton. I do love all of the go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, I was just going to say, and I agree with you. I think, one of the bigger mistakes, and this is, Brent Venables probably pulling the trigger a little early in that Auburn game and bringing in Michael Hawkins. A lot of that was – we've got to have this quarterback survive. And Michael Hawkins, obviously a completely different skill set, but you're right. I mean, they ultimately went back to the more talented quarterback in Jackson Arnold.
For sure. He's definitely going to have a lot more toys to play with this year, just like you mentioned. What is a reasonable, I hate to just say throw out some statistics, but I've talked to Bo Wallace, the former Hugh Freeze quarterback, and he said things like, hey, if you can throw for 3,000 yards on run calls in this offense. It's just the way the offense functions. And you saw Peyton Thorne last year. If he doesn't get benched for a game and a half, he probably throws for 3,000 yards. I guess what is like a good, reasonable expectation for Jackson that you would consider, I guess, a success this year, just from a statistical standpoint?
So I've got to look back on Peyton's numbers from last year, and that's not a good barometer.
Sure.
But, it's obviously a starting point. For me, everybody talks about Jackson Arnold's turnovers. He only threw 7 interceptions last year.
Yeah.
So, I think if you can keep the interceptions under double digits with a lot more attempts this year. So, yeah, Peyton, as you're right, 2,700 yards, 21 touchdowns. I think look, if these receivers show up, there's no reason it shouldn't be 30 plus touchdowns, 3,500 yards. I think a great number would be 3,500 yards, 32 touchdowns, 8 picks.
Yeah.
And I think that's achievable when you look at, I just think Cam Coleman, and we did our receiver rankings, our top 5. And they didn't release mine today. They had Dunaway, and Dunaway had Cam Coleman, the second best receiver in the conference. I had him the third best. And look, there's some really good receivers. I think the receiver position at the top is probably better than the quarterback position, at least going into the season. I also think, Peyton Thorne was much more athletic than people gave him credit for, but Jackson Arnold's even more athletic than that. So I think Jackson Arnold could give you maybe 400 or 500 yards on the ground with another 6-8 touchdowns.
I think Auburn fans would take that all day long. It's kind of crazy. Auburn's only had 2 3,000-yard passers ever, which is just absurd to even think about. Jason Campbell, Cam Newton, neither one of those guys threw for over 3,000 yards.
Is Stan White still not your leading passing yardage guy in the history of Auburn's program?
I think he's still all-time yards.
Yeah,
but you had Jarrett Stidham and Damian Krager. I think they're only guys that's thrown for over 3,000 yards, and I think that's just got to change. I mean, with the way offenses are going now, it's not even that big of a feat. It's like 250 yards a game. It's not even that incredibly tough with as many games as people play these days. We're going to talk about the roster rebuild in just a second, but before we do that, let's give a quick shout out to Rhoback.com. I know you guys love Rhoback as well. You can use coupon code BUTTON20 to take 20% off your order. If you love polos and you like zany prints, they got prints, they got stripes, they got solids, they got everything you can imagine. And hey, it's almost pool season. You got Memorial Day right around the corner. It's going to be pool season. You can get the swim trunks as well. So check them out. It's rowback.com. We'll be back right after this. You mentioned this earlier, Lance, and I kind of want to go back to it. There's been a lot of talk about, I guess, the roster rebuild and the lack of talent in key areas last year. Or I don't want to say lack of talent, but just maybe underperforming in some key spots, looking at the offensive line and maybe quarterback in crunch time or just things like that. And then you go out and you rebuild this roster. And then the conversation, though, is, hey, look, the talent, there was a talent issue at some spots last year, but it wasn't a 5-7 roster. Like, you probably coached yourself out of at least maybe 2 more wins that you could have maybe earned with what you had. So what do you think about, just talk about a coach, the confidence of a coach whenever you feel good about, hey, I don't have to, I know the offensive line can block this. I know the receivers can run this route. I feel like the quarterback can throw that pass, and it just kind of opens things up a little bit. What do you need to see from Hugh to, I guess, get over that hump of, I'm just going to say it. I hate to say it. I'm a big Hugh guy, underachieving, I guess, a little bit.
I mean, he has. You look at 110-win season, the last 5-6 seasons, 5 of the last 6 seasons, at least 4 losses. 4 of those, 5+ losses. I thought last year was going to be a breakout year. This is why probably nobody listens to me, because I was like, I really believe, and it was, and I'm sure you had the same conversations with Hugh, multiple conversations. It started last February. We were at the facilities talking specifically about Peyton Thorne, why you didn't go out in the portal and get a guy. And he's like, Peyton and I basically were finishing our own sentences or each other's sentences. Like, he's my guy. We feel really good about Peyton Thorne. And then, he backed that up when we were at SEC Media Days in Dallas. And, we had a couple of national guys come on, and you're closer to the program than I am. And they're kind of holding out on NIL until 2025 this year, which kind of surprised me. Like, in year 2, if I'm Hugh, I'm ready to make a mark right now. Like, how much more do you want to wait around? But it does seem like it all came together this year. Kind of got sold a bill of goods. I hate to blame it on Peyton Thorne. Love the kid. He was one of our NIL guys last year. Came on every week. Very candid, which is really refreshing with some of these athletes today. But I just think, he believed Peyton Thorne was going to be a really good quarterback, and it just didn't work out. And I do think that this is, I don't want to say light years, we shall see, but this is a much better option in this offense. And when you've got guys like Coleman and Simmons coming back for that second year, and then Singleton, a guy that, week in, week out for that Georgia Tech offense was doing some really versatile stuff. I look at this schedule though, Kyle, and the going to Waco is such a difficult game to open with. Yeah. And, that game's hovering around a pick. And I think a lot of this is going to be confidence, because if you get by Baylor, then you've got kind of test drive games against Ball State and South Alabama. And then all of a sudden you're sitting at 3-0 before things get real. Then you've got confidence, and maybe this offense is clicking by then. So Baylor game, I don't think you can overstate how important that is.
I'm going to be even a little bit more critical. I think the first maybe 2 or 3 offensive drives are critically important of that game. I mean, I'm just thinking about it from, Jackson's mindset, from Hugh's mindset. Jackson, I've sort of had a reset, and I got to come in and learn a new offense. I'm feeling good. Do any of those demons creep up from last year? I mean, there's going to be some scar tissue there. That there's going to be some scar tissue that he's going to have to work through. Maybe I'm like a little bit too intense here, but I feel like that game's very important. But I think those first, 2 or 3 offensive drives are extremely important as well.
Well, I do agree that Jackson Arnold, can he compartmentalize? Does he? And you would think getting a fresh start, being able to recalibrate, going from Norman to now Auburn, fresh start. But, if he comes out, he struggles against Baylor, throws a couple of picks, they lose the game. You just wonder how far back this sets this offense. I kind of agree with you. I think, maybe we are magnifying it a little bit. And I just wonder how aggressive they get early on when you've got the playmakers you've got on the perimeter. Auburn to me is one of the more fascinating teams coming into 2025 because I think they've got the potential. The schedule is a little bit more difficult than people think it is, especially once you roll into the back of September. But I think this Auburn team, if everything breaks right, 9 or 10 wins, and, we could be talking middle of November, late November, possibly, finding their way to the college football playoff now with 12 teams in it. And if I'm an Auburn fan, hey, this is year 3. I said this to Hugh last year when we sat down and talked. Elite coaches make a huge jump from year 1 to 2. Do you expect that out of yourself? And he was like, yeah, I do. So it didn't happen in year 2. You talk about some of those near misses. I mean, I go back to year 1. New Mexico State, that's just one of those head-scratching games. You win that game, and then if you don't have the 4th and forever gravedigger against Alabama, I just think the narrative is so different. And then you go to the Cal game last year with all of the turnovers, and, it's just a bounce here or there. I think probably the feeling is a lot different with Hugh, but I don't think there's going to be any passes in year 3. I'm like Hugh. I like him a lot. I thought it was an incredible hire. I liked him more than Lane Kiffin, and there was a lot of Auburn fans contingent that was kind of behind Lane. I was like, I think you're getting a better coach with Hugh Freeze. But I do think this is the year where I think it's got to be significant improvement. Like, I think anything less than 8 wins, if I'm an Auburn fan, I'm like, how are some of these other teams, how did South Carolina win 9 games last year? How is Tennessee in a college football playoff? How is SMU in one? How's Indiana in one? Auburn, who hasn't had a winning season since 2020, this is the time. There is money that is being spent. The recruiting classes have been solid the last couple of years. They've got some good transfers that have come in. I mentioned Singleton, Chaplin, Murphy. So now's the time to cash in and start winning some games.
I couldn't agree more. I do feel, though, and maybe this is just the Auburn fan in me, but I do feel like last year I felt like Auburn was a lot closer to a 7 or 8 win team. You look at how they had leaps and bounds, more explosive plays, gave up less sacks, had more yards per carry than the year prior. It's just like the luck factor was just not there. Like, it seemed like everything that could go wrong went wrong. And that's kind of what I'm taking into this year, that, hey, if you can get those little bitty things corrected, those kick some field goals. Hey, let's kick some field goals. That changes a lot of things. You miss a field goal on your own 35, on their 35, and now instead of making it and they got to drive 75 yards, they only have to drive, 60 yards for a touchdown. It just changes things so much. But I do feel like Auburn was a lot closer to being, maybe a 7-8 win team last year than maybe winning a couple more than losing a couple more, I guess.
Well, you mentioned those field goals, and I just, every time Towns Magoo would come on, I felt so bad for the kid. I'm like, boy, they're putting him in another situation to miss another kick. And I think we all remember a time when Auburn was one of the most airtight teams when it came to special teams, and especially kicking. I mean, anytime inside, it was almost like the NFL. Anytime inside of 50, the Carlsons were making these kicks. I mean, you could almost book it. Yeah. And that's a nice club to have in the bag if you're a coach. And hopefully Auburn's able to get back to that a little bit. I do think the culture is night and day. And again, you're a lot closer to the program than I am. But even seeing the guys around the facility last year, I mean, the Harsin thing was a disaster. Just, let's call it like it was.
You can see that one coming.
Yeah, there's a lot of confidence in that building right now. And I think the great thing for the Auburn Tigers is nobody's talking about it. Everybody's talking about, Texas and Arch Manning and Georgia. And then they're like Alabama in year 2 and Kalen DeBoer, they're going to bounce back. Everybody's talking about LSU with Nussmeier coming back. This is the year for Brian Kelly. And I do think those teams are going to be really good. But nobody's talking about Auburn. A lot of people are starting to jump on the bandwagon with me with Oklahoma. And I think this is great for Auburn to go under the radar. Now, again, once they kick it off in Waco, that's just, I don't think you can overemphasize. And I think, if they lose this game, a lot of Auburn fans are going to be like, well, it's an out-of-conference game, so we can get this back. It's not that big of a deal. I just think that game is so important for the confidence, the culture.
It's a tone setter. It's a tone setter. And there's with all the nobody's talking about Auburn, being as possible, like making a playoff run, but there is a good bit of like top 25 preseason talk out there. Like, I mean, there's an outside shot. Like, this could be, like a 24-25 or 23-24 preseason matchup. So, yeah, you get a chance, and I couldn't agree with you more. I think this game is so incredibly important for so many reasons.
And Kyle, I do think both Auburn and Baylor, I think Baylor's probably going to be a little bit higher. I think Baylor will be like 23, 24, 25. Auburn might sneak in there, but I think there definitely going to be others receiving votes.
Sure.
If Auburn is to win this game and then definitely go on and take care of business against Ball State and South Alabama at 3-0, that time they're probably inside the top 20. And that's when the team really starts to kick some confidence getting into that difficult schedule. And that's when they roll into Norman. And, we'll see. Again, my quarterback rankings, I got Mateer number 2, and a lot of people laughed that off. I watched way too much Washington State football last year. I had way too many wagers on that team. And I think that guy is going to be really good. And there's a lot of people, high ceiling, low floor. I just think Mateer is going to be good, but I cannot wait to see that game in Norman.
He looks so much like Baker Mayfield. It's crazy. Like the way he throws the ball and moves. I think he's going to be good too. So.
Yeah, I think he's going to be really, really good. But he's got a 29-year-old offensive coordinator in Ben Arbuckle, and it worked out last year in Pullman. At least that offense did. And everybody's like, he can't do this in the SEC. I think his style, quick hits, like you said, Baker. He's got that moxie to him. It's going to be. There's so many fascinating watches in this league this year, but back to the quarterback position, can Sellers do it for a full year? How healthy is Lagway? Could Arch Manning, we talked about this on the next round today, could he ultimately be the biggest bust in the history of college football? I mean, he could. If Arch Manning goes 8-4, people are going to be like, what the hell happened? So there's so many unknowns with all these quarterbacks, and they're all fascinating because they have so much potential.
Yeah, the Arch Manning, that could be a big story because he's decimated that quarterback room. Like, if you actually look at that quarterback room behind him, it's borderline terrifying. Lance, thank you for jumping on, taking a little time to jump on the pod. Tell everybody how they can find you, support you, and show you some love.
Yeah, I mean, look, jump on board. The next round, we're on basically every kind of platform you can imagine out there. We're daily 9 to 12 if you want to catch it live. If you want to consume it whenever on your own time, next round live. Again, all platforms, we would appreciate you jumping on. And if you want some winners, lanceslog.com. We'll have them up. I'm already starting to look at week 1. I kind of get so excited just looking at these numbers just unfold. We get these kick times. And, hell, we're only 40 days away from SEC Media Days. I know I'll see you there. And then, that's when everything gets real. So you guys do great work on the barn. Hopefully I can jump back on with you guys sooner than later. And hopefully it's a hell of a season for Auburn because
last year was brutal.
Last year was not fun. And we've got a lot of people around the office that are big Auburn fans. So, and it's good for business. A lot of clients are big Auburn fans. And I like you. I like you a lot. And, I think 6-6, 7-5, that's the last thing Auburn wants to do is reset.
No, totally agree. Couldn't agree more. Guys, thanks for listening. If you like the video, like it. If you like the channel, subscribe to it. We're going to be back every single day. It's another episode of the Top Button Podcast. Stay buttoned.
Thanks for listening, and drive home safely.